Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Lowdown. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the Academy Director of New York Red Bulls, Sean McCafferty. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, appreciate it. Honestly, it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to having some good discussion.
Another Irishman to add to the list, Sean. And where better place to begin? Growing up in Derry, can you bring us through your first ever football memory?
Derry was a great place to grow up. I lived in a place called Galia, which was kind of council homes or row homes as far as the eye could see. So you were never short of getting two teams together to play. So now, as far back as I can remember, it was just playing with neighbors and older boys and what have you. And my next door neighbor, Martin Mooney, actually was a Liverpool fan, so it's his fault. I'm a Liverpool fan, but just growing up playing for the local team, Murfield, and honest, just playing for enjoyment. But was lucky enough to, develop something and some okay attributes growing up and get across the water and what have you, and lucky enough to go in places like Nottingham Forest, Norwich City, Everton, clubs like that. So it was around then I was thinking, all right, this could be something, you could get into and something that you could be potentially trying to make a career out of. So, but growing up in Derry and playing with, we were just lucky as well in my age group. A lot of players went on to play at a decent level, a lot higher level than I did. So, really enjoyable and fell in love with the game then. And as my dad told me, you haven't had a proper job since.
But it's a funny one because later on we'll speak about youth developments, but do you find that too, Sean? It's a common trend in this podcast too. I interview a lot of people, ask that same question about earliest football memory, and they always tend to go back to, living in these huge housing estates, huge games of 20v20 football. Is it like it's not necessary, but it obviously helps to have had a footballing upbringing like that?
I think so. Especially, obviously, you didn't have your devices now. I've kids of my own and their iPads, phones, and all that. Where our toy was outside. It was just get outside and do whatever you want, try to stay out of trouble, but it was just play football and just silly games. Like talk about headers and volleys, something as stupid as that. But that's how you learn technique. That's how you learn little things that maybe just in an informal way. So we were always touching a ball, doing something and learning, probably not thinking we were learning at the same time. So every day there was always a game. So every day you're playing. And ultimately, I think you heard from people obviously a lot older than me. That's where they learned. They learned on the streets. And in Derry, we were lucky. Murfield, my dad and another friend of mine, Mark McKeever, his father, they would kind of be coaching us, but they were just there, making sure, facilitating. There was no real coaching going on until we get a bit older. So you just figured stuff out. And there's a lot to be said for that. There's for me, probably one of the biggest things for coaches is just over coaching for themselves, love the sound of their own voice type thing. And they forget that the players learn the most by just playing and experiencing. So it's one of the things even here at our level that we focus on. The most important learning is learning through experiencing.
I think too, it's on a deeper level as well. It's kind of cultivating that love and cultivating that curiosity for that unconscious repetition, we call it, in terms of playing on a variety of services. You could be playing in your basement, be it here in London, Ontario, with the weather at the moment. You could be playing in grass fields at home with grass up to your ankles. You could be playing on driveway on the concrete at home. You're still getting in all those reps. But amongst all of that, Sean, where did coaching come into play?
So when we went I was a YT at Peterborough. So I moved over to England when I was 15, 16. And part of that, the FA put you through your coaching, your first coaching, your prelim badge. So I get introduced to it a little bit there. And then from there, you're always looking to earn a few extra pounds, to be honest with you. So then the youth programs would always bring the youth team players in to do a little bit. And I kind of enjoyed it. I just love being around the younger players and the energy they give you and just the innocence and the passion they had. So that was the first time I remember thinking, you know what, this could be something I could do. And one of the coaches at the time, he's probably trying to tell me you weren't going to make the next grade, to be honest with you. And he says, coaching, you seem to take it naturally, seems to be something you enjoy. So that was it. And then again, ridiculously modest career. I'm back there and playing League of Ireland, an Irish league. Wasn't going to make me 11. I was back in Derry and probably getting in a routine I shouldn't be getting into, to be honest with you. And then an opportunity to come to America then, and that was it. Once I had an opportunity to come over, it was a friend of mine and a former coach, Tony Williams and Barry Love. Just a brilliant opportunity to come over to Pennsylvania, work some camps, do a little bit of work. And I just fell in love with it. And I said, this is it. And I was young, 22, I think it was at the time. And I said, this is it for me. So we ended up then, I think it was a Limavady at the time. I said, listen, I just want to kind of, tear up the contract a bit and just really just commit to being a coach at a young age. And that's what I did. It was a great opportunity. And again, love home, but I need to get out of it. I need to get out of Ireland and Derry and try and do something different.
Sounds a case of burning the boats.
A wee bit.
And I mean, like, for those of who are watching this on YouTube, I mean, you can see the Red Bull crest on your chest, Sean. I mean, however, it was another experience. It would have been at Barca Academy that would have been quite formative in your coaching career.
It was. I was in the Pennsylvania area for about 15 years. So met my wife there, and with children and bought a house, and it was comfortable. Working with FC Delco, who were obviously a kind of big club and had produced players in the past, even managers. Benny Olsen came through there, Zach Steffen came through there, and among many. So it was a great experience. But it was when Barca Academy opportunity came along, and I took the phone call. I was on the Academy Directors course, and I think that's why I got the phone call. So it was just something different. Let's go out and have a look at it first. My wife didn't want to move, but we went to Arizona to Casa Grande, and the weather was beautiful. The facility was fantastic. And then the project, the owner, he said, listen, we couldn't tell me right then, but we're going to be doing a partnership with FC Barcelona. And I mean, listen, as far as methodologies go, there's, it's hard to argue there's anything better historically in developing top players. So convinced the missus to kind of take it out there, and it was unbelievable. Honestly, I think at that point, as a coach, I thought I was a good coach or a decent coach, and I realized when I got there, I was nowhere near as good as I thought I was or decent. I just learned so much. The details, the reasons of all the activities, just everything mattered. The attention to detail, the standards. So it was an unbelievable experience going out there. The environment, like I said, players went to school there. They dorm, the residency component was really interesting for me. So, the first 6 months scouting, putting teams together with Miha Klein, the director there, it was just an absolutely fantastic experience, and fortunate. To be honest with you, we got to go to La Masia a few times to obviously take some of our top talents over there. One of the first trips we had Julian Naranjo was over there, Matthew Hoppy. So we were just lucky to have a good group, and they built a bit of credibility. And I think the relationship's gotten even stronger from then. But just seeing that level, what they do, again, for me, was just an unbelievable experience. And for 100%, I learned more in that 2.5 years than I did in the previous 15.
And I mean, to the common man, or to the common football man, so to speak, Sean, I mean, it would have represented a big enough transition, leaving Barca Academy, moving on to Red Bull, two unique yet separate styles of football. How did you find that transition at the time?
Yeah, it was interesting to me because I think with every philosophy and methodology, it has its strengths, but it also has its, in my opinion anyway, maybe its weaknesses. I think when it's too stringent and there's not room for some adaptability and flexibility, I think there's just a ceiling. And for me, I just felt it was limiting. And this opportunity to learn something new and something different. Listen, a ball recovery phase and against the ball, very, very similar, right? It's you want the ball back as quickly as you can. All those, the pressing, counter-pressing triggers and what have you. But what was really interesting for me here at Red Bulls is how can we merge in both? How can we merge both philosophies to create something that's not just dominant with the ball or not just dominant against the ball, but can be dominant with both? And especially in youth football, we're trying to develop holistic players, more well-rounded players, because the game's evolving, the game's changing, and at the end of the day, there's more than one phase of the game and more than one phase of play. So for me, it was a really interesting project and something I felt would help me develop as a director. Obviously, I took on the director's role and I was no longer coaching when I came here. So bringing in the staff and trying to implement that has been unbelievably enjoyable. Visibly, I've seen the improvement from day one we came in, when it was, I'm not afraid to say, I've said it many times, it's a bit of a car crash. too many players that weren't at the level, too many players that were 100 mile an hour but couldn't slow down to make good decisions or execute them technically. So it was a great challenge, and again for us, and we feel in the past 2.5 years we're in a really good position, and it's a fantastic club because they play young players. That was the biggest thing for me, Gunter, was I'm at a club that will play young players and push their players through. So as an academy director, that's all you need, like just that motivation, and that to be fair, motivates all of the staff who are here as well.
And for those that are unfamiliar about Red Bull, although I doubt that there are a few, I mean, take us through the Red Bull identity, because you see it across F1, you see it across football, you see it across the cliff diving and a whole host of other sports and different pursuits, Sean. It is just there, visible, underpinning everything that is done.
It is. I mean, it's one of the most exciting, parts about being involved with this club is it's a global brand, but it's not just a global football brand. I mean, it's Red Bull. It's an energy drink. So the style of football and everything you do has to match it. Somebody said one time, and you want to slow down. It's like, no. I don't work for FC Xanax. I work for Red Bull, and this is who we are: high intensity, high energy, and everything that we do, and innovation as well, right? You talk about Red Bull, and it's innovative. Everything that they do, as you just alluded to, with not just the Formula One, but these X Games and the crazy things they attempt, shooting a lad into space. So it's an unbelievable organization to work for, because they always want to be on the cutting edge. You know what I mean? And everything that they do, and so the football world, obviously, Champions League teams, obviously now with Bragantino in Brazil and ourselves in New York. So it's just an unbelievable resource they have for some of the best practices and what works in certain continents and what we can take and what we can implement here. So, genuinely coming here to Red Bull, I couldn't have picked a better, more of a dream job, to be honest, as a director.
And take us through that as well, because you just mentioned it there. Red Bull, of course, being Red Bull New York, being part of multi-club network. I mean, most coaches that listen to this, Sean, they're there coaching grassroots clubs. They're operating not necessarily in silos, but clubs living on their own island. But I'd imagine economies of scale available to you working at an organization like Red Bull, being able to sit down and get on a Zoom and speak to the guys in Austria, Germany, even as far as Brazil, must be quite interesting, to say the least.
It really is. I mean, obviously, it's each club has its own little nuances, and the culture is slightly different. But at the end of the day, they're still a part of the Red Bull family, and there's some non-negotiables that we discussed. But it's there. It's there for everybody, for every staff member. So your peers, whether you're an athletic trainer, whether it's there for everybody to learn and have that mindset of let's continue to learn, let's continue to check and challenge. Present what you're doing. You know what I mean? Not always getting things from it, but how can we be the pioneers in certain areas here in New York for the organization? So I think it's exciting. I mean, obviously you get to go over there. We took 4 of our top talents there to Leipzig in the summer, and we go to the next gen tournament in Salzburg every year. Take our under 16s every year. We played Inter Milan, Benfica, Independiente del Valle. You get to play against these top organizations, and then just communicate and chat with your peers when you're there. And then obviously from there, build relationships. So then, Zoom calls and, make sure you're catching up and just sharing some best practices. And it opens up I would say it opens up our ability to learn, tenfold as compared to maybe somebody's not part of that multi-club organization.
Exactly. And I think it's the openness and the curiosity to learn, which is key, because, I mean, you speak about the start of your tenure compared to now, Red Bull, almost like 2 separate academies. You went in at the start, in your own words, you said it was a little bit of a car crash in terms of the players that were identified and whatnot. Now, you said the methodology has slightly changed to kind of wave in the positional brand of football, so on and so forth. Can you take us through exactly how has that methodology changed for developing youth players over time?
Yeah, I think obviously for people who maybe don't know Red Bull, when you think about it, is it's about efficiency and effectiveness, right? And it's when we have it, we win the ball back. We're trying to go and score, right? That's exactly it. And I think a lot of teams are like that. The opponents are not organized, they're unbalanced, so it makes a lot of sense. So that's what we try to do. What we think we tried to implement a little bit is the understanding of when that's not on, what now. You know what I mean? It can't still be, down your throat when it just doesn't make sense. So we're trying to develop players who are youth players. They're still developing cognitively. So we have to be able to help them and understand the situations of the game and the decision-making piece of it and the why, right? And ultimately, when they get to then to that next level, whether it's the second team or the first team, then it's about that next step, but winning and understanding that at a higher level. But we honestly are just trying to get our players to understand that, it can't be 100 mile an hour all the time. There has to be a term 100 to 70. When Chris Armas was here, he used that quite often, is in those big moments, can you slow down just a little bit for the finalization piece? Can you slow down to see the picture where, okay, help with a better decision? So for us, it was really about implementing that and making sure that, and it took a while, don't get me wrong, because it goes into the scouting types of players you're bringing in, so they're not all the same. It goes into the profiles of what we're looking for. It can't all be certain positions where it's all about speed, quickness, athleticism, endurance. You need, we always say you need piano players as well as, so we want a different type of player in different positions. So it really was over, and again, COVID hit, but it was over that 3.5 years, and I feel we're still not there. We're about 6 months to a year out of the full, the first group we came in, cycling through. We're about that, and we're really excited with the younger age groups we have. We have a much better balance. We have a much better, players who have better understanding of the game. So we are getting closer in our mind to being dominant in all phases. Not all the time, but at least teaching and developing players that feel that way and at least going with that mentality.
Exactly. So for want of a better phrase, I suppose, the players were missing that little piece of extra context, that game insight, position, moment, direction, speed, call it whatever you will, or combination of the above. I mean, if you're a youth player at Red Bull and you're learning that context on top, what does that education look like, Sean? How does that learning exactly take place?
Yeah, I mean, it's on and off the pitch. The best learning happens on the pitch, but these young players they learn visually. Video, we do a lot of video. The coaches do a lot of video, whether it's position specific, group. But for us, it was on the pitch. The intensity they train at is nothing like I'd ever experienced in my 22 years. The intensity wasn't the problem. The work rate wasn't the problem. The willingness wasn't the problem. It was putting the quality and the consistency into the execution as a standard as important as all the other stuff I just alluded to. And that's where the learning really happened. It's what you prioritize or what they prioritize as coaches. You have to celebrate somebody doing the dirty work, winning a tackle, leads to a goal. Absolutely, making it lasting. But we also have to celebrate the player who can break a line with a perfectly weighted pass at the correct foot to give that non-verbal deter. Really celebrating with the ball attributes as much as we did the against the ball. And, again, this is youth development, especially 12, 13, 14. We have to develop players who are much more well-rounded because when they go to our first team, the league's getting to such a high level, just working hard won't get it done. There has to be quality when we win it. And again, for us, it's all about efficiency and effectiveness. And we've had success with that in the past, but I think developing higher level players for our first team is one of our biggest missions.
And studying in preparation for this podcast, speaking to you off air, I mean, it seems to be very much holistic, that development piece. I know, Sean, you yourself, you're huge into the education piece, as are everyone in Red Bull, and you too, you're big on not skipping the steps when it comes to youth development. You mentioned, I think it was on the official Red Bull podcast before, accelerating development through the professionalisation of the environment. Now, how does that exactly happen?
Yeah, we kind of introduced a lot of different initiatives. One of the biggest ones most recently is an individual development program. So, we've got the school on site and we're able we're gaining more contact time is what we're doing. And ultimately, there's various ways, in our opinion, to accelerate development. Number one is additional contact time, getting into the nuances, the details, whether it's position specific, whether it's individual based, what they need, but making sure everybody's got their own IDP. And it sounds cliche, everybody has it, but what are we doing to work on it? Video, nutrition, in the gym, all those things, leaving nothing to chance really. Right now, we're scratching the surface with some of our top talents, say 15 of the top talents. But we have put a director of that program to really get into the details. So Sammy Castellanos, is doing an unbelievable job there, and we're just getting started. So that for us accelerates their development. Another way for us to do it is obviously then through exposure and opportunity. So we're a club, and I've alluded to it before, we play a lot of players up, like 4, 5, 6 every age group, just to get them out of their comfort zone, to challenge them as much as possible. Our first team's the youngest in the MLS, right? And it's that way all the way through. Our second team last year is the same way. For us, it's about exposing our young players to difficult situations, because you find out then who solves them, who's the problem solvers, right? And it happen at different stages, but you have to throw them in the deep end and find out, and can they swim? And for us, again, everybody will get the opportunity, whether they dip in, bring them back, go back again. Some of them go in and make an immediate impact. Sergio Gomez, 16 years of age, scored 2 MLS goals last year. John Tolkien's been flying. He's got, I think it's 80-something MLS games, and he's at 2002. Daniel Edelman, the U20 captain's gone in there. And they're not just part of the squad, they're contributing players. And that's the biggest thing for us. Are we developing players who contribute to the success of the first team? And then players who have a return on investment. It could be an asset and a value to the club down the line. And we can only do that by accelerating their development. We can't keep them in their comfort zone. If it means we don't win certain things, who cares? Doesn't matter. Nobody will keep their job for winning a MLS Next under 17 league. It's about developing pros and pushing them through. If you win one in the process, great. But you can develop a winning mentality without prioritizing winning.
That's a good point. And that brings me to my next question, which is, like, you're obviously speaking there about the professionalization of the environment, pushing players over the line, seeing who can last in those uncomfortable situations. But, with the success that you guys had or are currently having too, it creates sometimes unfair expectations. So where this is lending me now towards a coaching lens, so to speak, Sean, is what are the coaches doing? How has coach development changed in alignment with basically the changes that have been occurring in the environment you have for developing young players?
Listen, it starts with the best people, right? Our coaches and that staff, they run the academy. Like, they're the ones that, we can set all the standards in the world and as many PowerPoints as you want. They have the standards on the pitch. They are the ones that get the best out of the players. That's where it started for us. We just raised the standards of everyday training. We just every minute matters. Every single minute matters. There's no throwaway activities. There's a lot of, what's this one for? We're just getting them warmed up. Well, it's a waste of your time. What do you do? Like, can't waste a minute. We don't have enough time with them. So that's kind of the mentality of the staff. What I love about the staff is they're always, in a healthy way, trying to outdo each other in certain things, but there's a real collaboration between them, just to raise the standards. And somebody's winning something, or somebody doing something to a level higher than everybody else, creates a bit of banter as well. But it actually raises a level of the, the coaches who maybe need to catch up, but somebody else will be better in a certain area, in a different area. So it's just it's an unbelievable culture that they've created and that they have in there. And for me to go and watch training and observe training and just see it is, for me, it's just a pleasure. I'm watching the players. The coaches are top coaches. Can they get better? Absolutely. Do we try and help develop them? Yep. But ultimately, they've created a great environment. The players are just getting after it. We're in the Northeast, where, again, out there tonight, it's cold, but they're just getting after it. They just compete. It's one of the things you never have to ask for, ever. And so the environment is best with best. Players are going to come out of that environment. We just have to hopefully facilitate and not get in their way.
And like, you've been at the forefront of youth development there, Sean, for 20 plus years. With references of two of the most famous ideologies in your hard drive. Where do you see the next evolution going in youth development?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I'm currently doing a master's and for my dissertation, I think I'm the cognitive development side. I think there's a lot of research I've gone into, predicting future talents through genetics, predicting future prospects through, growth maturation, physical testing, all of that. But I still think we're scratching the surface of how we can predict and then develop the cognitive side, because ultimately the brain's still the most important muscle, the body, you know what I mean? And so for me, that's what's really interesting is I think I do believe here in the US, we don't address it enough. We don't focus on it enough at the younger age groups. And I think for me, the more intelligent players we can create, then we have everything else. We literally have everything else. And you and I talked about it before you come on, but the game has grown massively, and it's a culture shift, right? The game is, I read something now with it's taken over maybe ice hockey and viewership, and it's going to basketball and base. It's coming for them as well. World Cup comes, it's just going to be unbelievable. So how can we then even professionalize it even more? Sports psychologists, right? Again, kind of mental coaches. Just how can we help the players develop their brain to go along with the technical and the physical? I think that's the biggest area we have to improve and address in order to catch up, because we're getting better here, but so is everybody else, right? The fences aren't falling behind, and so for me, that's where I see it at the MLS level and the academies, where there's the most room for growth. I think more better coaches will hopefully develop more better players. The coach development education stuff is definitely improved over the last 20 years massively since I've been here. So we're making great strides. Again, people say, we're doing a lot of things really well. It's just we're in the infancy stages.
Exactly.
We're just in the infancy stages. People are expecting too much too soon, in my opinion.
Just having that patience to, what's that quote? Patience to plant seeds under which trees you'll never see grow, you know?
That's exactly it. It's exactly it. It's funny. One of our Jonathan Rhodes, our 17th coach, did a presentation at the coaches convention there, and one of his slides, and he goes, "We have to be experts in patience," and it's exactly what you're alluding to. We just have to. It's not an overnight thing. We have to be patient, and it's step by step, and fail, and try something different, and succeed, but we have to be that, not just here as for us as a club, but just as, in my opinion, is a kind of football community here. You know, we're talking everybody getting excited, but the last World Cup and now 2026. There's very few countries that you don't just pick a year and go, we're going to win it then. That's it. We're going to win the World. Not that easy. We can just kind of keep getting better. And I think for me anyway, I think we have every year.
So experts in patience, experts in sports psychology, experts in nutrition, experts in analysis. Before you touched coaching, sounds like an easy gig.
Yes, and that's it, right? I mean, there can be too much. Don't get me wrong. You see the staffs now; it's crazy. It's almost like the American football staffs. There's more coaches and players, and these in the Premier League clubs and what have you. So, but I just think the more support and the more, if we can immerse more players in the environments that have been proven to produce players, we're still, how many in a continent? How many residences are there? How many homestays are there? There's too many factors still that we can't. What are they eating? They're coming from school, and have they eaten well, and things of that nature. So one of the best things definitely about Barca Academy was everything was controlled, right? And people can argue whether for that or against it, but everything was controlled. We knew what they're eating. They were sleeping there. We knew what the gym workouts were. They were, they weren't teammates, they were brothers, so to speak. And it's one of the best things I can say about the place. It developed pros. When you look at it from Real Salt Lake, were there, Justin Glad, and I think it's 25% of the US 20 World Cup team was from Real Salt Lake. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the only residency in the country. And so then, but now other clubs are starting to do that and reap the rewards. Philly Union have done a fantastic job, and they come in there and at the homestays and at the school, and to be honest, we're playing a bit of catch up there. I think FC Dallas have obviously done some of that as well, but these are all clubs that play young players. So we can do the best academy in the world. If you're not at a club that's willing to play young players and believe in young players, then all that work doesn't matter. So it has to be a line from top to bottom. And I think, the clubs I just mentioned, including ourselves, do the best job in the US.
With that being said, it's intriguing from my lens, and I know of those listening, to reflect back in that cognitive development piece, Sean, because I think that mental agility and conditioning is so paramount to the development of the new players of the future. I mean, you look back and watch a game even from 10, 15 years ago, two completely different sports in terms of the pace in which the game is played.
Yeah. I, I couldn't agree with you more. The demands are unbelievable. The demands have never been as high. Just nothing's getting slower. Doesn't matter what sport it is. World records are being broken. Everything's getting faster. Everybody's getting stronger. But the demands, the game's getting younger. So these young players that.
So, Sean, I mean, we were just speaking there about cognitive development, very interesting piece, and what we're speaking about there. I mean, the mental agility and conditioning for me of, youth development nowadays is paramount to creating that future player. And we were only speaking off air there about players or watching games from 10, 15 years ago. Like, it's night and day compared to the modern game.
No, it is. And as we talked about, just the speed in which the game is played, you talk about every single player is quick, strong, athletic, and the demands on players is greater than ever, covering more distances and everything, data, there's nowhere to hide, and things of that nature, GPSs. So, and for me, that's all the physical side, but then there's the mental side of how do you deal with that? How do you deal with a young player in the changing room? All the teams are getting younger, and it's a difficult thing for a young player. And we signed a 14-year-old. I think NYCFC signed a 14-year-old. RSL, they're signing pro contracts at 14. These boys, and they need help. They need people to help them get through it and deal with it. You throw them into these changing rooms. They need support. I think it's one of the biggest things: support and how to deal with it. The emotional intelligence piece, which we maybe expect and we shouldn't. So we talked about earlier. I think it's the biggest area we have for improvement is the help and support, because it's not going to change. It's only going to become even more prevalent, in my opinion. Part of the academy directors course, we went to FC Midtjylland in Denmark. We're a very innovative club. And Midtjylland had a transition coach, which was really interesting, and maybe you know about it, but his job was literally to help those players transition on and off the pitch from youth to pro, and to make that transition smooth. And it was just, for me, it just made so much sense. And I know clubs now are starting to implement it. You have different things like loans managers for players that are going away and coming back. But it's, these are still young boys, and their brain is nowhere near fully developed. Won't be getting developed till they're probably mid-20s. I think the research tells us now. But we have to support them, in my opinion, in a much better way to help them through that transition.
So interesting, that piece, because you'd imagine a person in a role of that would be such a huge value add to any football club. I mean, in the Premier League and the EFL today, you see proliferated pathways, coaches, pathways, managers, so on and so forth. But I think the transition coach I've never really heard of, but that's an interesting one, and one which I've jotted down here. I mean, looking at the evolution of the game though on the field, Sean, I mean, one presentation I always refer back to is Marcelo Bielsa presenting at the CBF conference. I believe it's in 2015, where he's speaking about generalists over specialists. And he's speaking about the IDP of a footballer. They should always be able to play 3-4 different positions. This multifunctionality of football I've always found enlightening, as equally engaging and interesting. It's always something which I've seen from a Bielsa team. I'm sure you can echo that. But it's something which we're beginning to see proliferated a lot through top flight football nowadays.
Yeah, the game, I mean, people talk about formations. It's a starting position, and the game is just fluid. You have to be able to, the game it's situational. I mean, you talk about what the game demands and requires. It's different every game, right? And it's different in certain positions in every game. So you're not able to show your attributes in the way that you want to. So you have to be, in my opinion, a much more well-rounded player, because the game requires more solutions, right? Just because of how it's evolved physically. But, I think you look at teams who you always see, Bielsa's teams are, you watch them and they're exciting and they can be really enjoyable to watch, and then they can be frustrating because they're just so open, and they just get, and you're going, change something, do something, right? But at the same time, he's trying to be innovative, and he's trying to find new ways. Guardiola the same way. They just see blocks for the most part. They have to become so innovative in a different way to break down opponents, drag them out. What spaces can they get into? And for me, it's really interesting to see all these little chess games, and the game's going to evolve, right? It was 4-3-3 expansive, and now 3-5-2. It just evolves, and I think that's the interesting and exciting piece for me. And I think I alluded to it earlier, is a philosophy has to have some adaptability and flexibility, right? The same way positional, formations and positions. The game's too fluid. The game is what you can do. Watch as many games as you want and as many scouting videos as you want, and the game might be completely different. So the players have to adapt. The players are the ones who have to problem solve. The players are the ones who have to really find the solutions to what the opponents are giving them. So we have to train in that way. We have to teach in that way, which again means more back to them, right? And I think I said it is they learn by experiencing. Constraints can obviously challenge them, and coaches can facilitate and set things up to bring certain behaviors maybe out. But in my opinion, I think as Fabregas said, it's gotten to a point where everybody's trying to tell the players what they should do in every action, every moment. And I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with him. We're going to start to stifle creativity. We're going to develop robots over the flair players and the difference makers that the game needs, that the game, absolutely is crying out for. So for us, it's a balance. Youth development. We have to embrace creativity. We have to embrace players who do things that maybe by the book is wrong, right? On numerical disadvantage, play back. Nah, go on, 1v2. Have a go. See what you can do. So I think it's an interesting one. Again, for me, the game goes full circle. A lot of the things are being done. It's not the first time. Maybe it's the first time some people are hearing them, but a lot of it's just, kind of old wine in new bottles.
Exactly, yeah. You're right. Haven't gone full circle, I mean, because we're asking a global question here. It's not only like the same problem which clubs here in North America are facing. It's a worldwide kind of, not even epidemic, but it's a worldwide problem. But the solution may be as simple as a local solution, such as found on the streets of Derry City. To echo what we spoke about at the very start of this conversation.
Yeah, for me, it has to be the balance of it, right? There's social media and everybody has an opinion, everybody has a philosophy, and that's great and that's fantastic. And I think it's really helped people share their ideas. But at the end of the day, it's still football. This is not rocket science, and it's especially not rocket science in youth development. And so the basics are still the basics, right? And for me, I remember it was Kevin Thelbel who was here, is now at Everton. Players need to, first of all, be brilliant at the basics. Be brilliant at the basics, right? The ability to simply, have a game understanding, control the ball, pass the ball, dribble with the ball, and that's it, foundation. And then give them the freedom to express themselves, to see what then is going to be their weapon. What's going to be their specialty? What's going to be the thing that they're going to bring to a team, or what's going to be the reason they become a professional footballer? You want well-rounded players, but then it's the weapon that's going to be. But you can't, can you make it better? Yes, but they'll find that out. They'll find out that 1v1, right? That's me. That's my weapon. That's great. And I think it's our job, honestly, just to facilitate that, and they'll show us, not we show them.
Exactly. And I mean, we spent a good part of this, a large part of this podcast, Sean, speaking about the development and education and others. What about yourself? I mean, you spoke about the advantages that you have working in a huge organization such as Red Bull, the start that you were handed at Barca Academy, and indeed all the other experiences you had from Pennsylvania back to Derry and whatnot. But who are you looking into, and what are you looking into, I mean, outside of football, to kind of update that leadership and management hard drive?
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough. So I'm taking a master's in sport and directorship through the GIS organization. So we're actually head there in a couple of weeks' time. But one of our assessments was, to kind of audit a high performance organization. So a friend of mine on the course, Darren Powell, he was a coach at San Antonio FC, now at Inter Miami, and they just named one of Phil's assistants there. But he worked there, and he got us in with the San Antonio Spurs. And the San Antonio Spurs, one of the most successful basketball teams in the NBA. But what was really intriguing about that is, they're in a very small market. They didn't have all the global superstars that pay the most money. But what they had and why they were successful was that they had an identity, and they had a humility to them, and they brought in the types of players that fit their identity. So when you talk about going to an organization and learning how to be successful and have sustainable success, it's not just about money. It's not just about buying the best. It's really interesting for me is, well, no, you create a culture, and you're scouting is because you want to bring staff and players in who fit that culture. And then once you have everybody buying in, then great things can happen. And we've seen a lot of teams be good for a while, but the sustainable success that they had was unbelievable. So you talk about learning from different sports. Listen, everybody read the New Zealand All Blacks book, right? In regards to, how many times, sweep the sheds, as simple as it sounds, but humility, like, just how can we instill that humility in players, and kind of selfness? This is one of the things that's big here. You can learn from everything. You can also learn what not to do, right? For me, I look at clubs that are just, that don't have sustained success, just because they keep changing their identity depending on who's the first team manager. Like if I'm an academy director of any club, I want to be somewhere where there's clarity of this is who we are, whether I'm leaving and the next person in, there's clarity on what that role is, there's clarity on what the club is all about. Red Bull's unbelievable for that. Again, thinking about some other organizations that have that, Ajax, Barcelona, right? It doesn't matter. Like you don't even know the head coach. It doesn't matter. That's their identity. That's who they are for the most part. Barca lost it for a little bit, and I've got it back again with the young players, and it's not a coincidence they're having success again. So look at the San Antonio Spurs, look at the Formula One, and how they've kind of created their identity as a Red Bull Formula One, the success that they're having. I think you can learn from all different sports. And again, like I said, on this course, I've been fortunate enough to talk with and learn from a lot of different leaders, and obviously, a couple of them now kind of become a bit, of a mentor for me, which is fantastic.
And I mean, as we come to a close on this podcast, Sean, I mean, anyone who's slightly bit inspired about your journey and wishes to thread a similar path, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's probably starting with the end in mind. Where do you want to go? What do you want to be? You want to be a coach, and that's where then taking the steps towards that, in learning, experiencing. You talked about earlier yourself. You're getting into these different clubs and going and observing, and sometimes that's the best learning. It's just going and watching and observing and watching the best people do their job, ask questions. One of the things on a previous podcast, it was advice for I think it was for coaches, was like, just be inquisitive, but be humble, right? And I think sometimes people just think they have it solved. And again, through my experience, 15 years, and I thought just because of your teams are winning and players are being developed, and I had no idea how much I didn't know until I went to, Barca. And then I realized, oh my, nothing. You have no idea what the standards really are. So just that humility, and it was humbling, it was unbelievable. And I kind of carried that, and never think you have it solved, and just keep wanting to learn, keep wanting to gain experiences. And, for me, I'm here now 3.5 years, and I love it. And I see myself here for a long time, hopefully. But you're still getting better, and you're still growing, and you're still hopefully developing yourself as an individual. And, that's what I'm going to keep trying to do, and bring in the best people around me, the subject matter experts, because ultimately, my role is, again, facilitate. They're the ones that run the academy. So having the best people around you for anybody in a leadership role, that's my best advice.
It's a never-ending game, isn't it?
For sure. There's never an end line, which is the exciting part about it.
Sean, I mean, I've taken a lot away from this conversation. I know countless others tuning in, listening to this will have done too. Thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. All right, then we'll connect soon. Thank you.